She had been looking forward to this lunch all week. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon, and the small restaurant she chose was usually calm and welcoming. She walked in with a soft smile, greeting the hostess politely. The aroma of warm bread and fresh coffee made her feel at ease, and for a moment it seemed like just another ordinary day. She had no idea that her day was about to take a sudden turn. As she scanned the restaurant for a seat, she noticed a few patrons already settled in, chatting softly or enjoying their meals. She hoped to find a table near the window so she could watch people pass by while sipping her coffee. The hostess showed her to a table in the middle of the restaurant, and she thanked her before sitting down. For a brief moment, everything felt normal. Almost immediately, she felt someone's gaze. It was sharp and uncomfortable. She glanced toward the source and noticed a man at a nearby table staring at her. At first, she tried to ignore it, thinking maybe he was just curious or staring absent-mindedly. But as minutes passed, it became clear that his attention was not casual. There was something unpleasant in the way he looked at her, a mix of anger and disgust that made her stomach twist. She turned her attention back to the menu, hoping to distract herself. Moments later, the man stood up and walked toward her table. He didn't wait to be polite or to understand why she was there. He spoke loudly, his words sharp and cutting. He questioned why she was sitting there, making it clear that he didn't believe she belonged in the restaurant. His voice carried across the small room and heads began to turn. She tried to respond calmly, telling him that she had every right to be there. She explained that she had come to enjoy her lunch like any other customer. The man's anger escalated quickly. He refused to listen and continued to speak in a way that was clearly intended to intimidate her. She felt a mixture of fear and disbelief. How could someone be so openly hostile simply because of her skin color? She looked around the restaurant hoping someone would step in. Some patrons watched silently, their expressions a mix of shock and uncertainty. Others quickly looked away, not wanting to get involved. She realized she was alone in facing this confrontation. The restaurant manager finally approached, but instead of offering support, he sided with the man. He told her she needed to leave. She tried to explain that she had done nothing wrong, that she was simply there to eat her meal. But the manager's decision was final. She felt a deep sense of injustice as she packed up her belongings. Her hands trembled slightly as she closed her bag, and her mind raced with questions. How could this happen in broad daylight? How could someone in charge of a business act this way, allowing a customer to be mistreated so openly? She stood up, trying to maintain her composure despite the rush of emotions flooding her. She held her head high even though her heart was heavy. As she walked toward the exit, she felt the weight of countless similar experiences she had faced in her life. Moments when she had been judged unfairly or treated differently because of the color of her skin. This incident, though painful, was not new. Yet the sting of humiliation in front of strangers was something she could not ignore. Outside the restaurant, the cool air felt like a small relief against the heat of anger and embarrassment she felt inside. She paused for a moment, taking deep breaths. She tried to steady herself, reminding herself that she was strong and that this incident did not define her. She refused to let the ignorance and hatred of one man, or the cowardice of a manager, diminish her sense of self-worth. She noticed a few people walking by, some glancing curiously at her as she stood on the sidewalk. She wondered if they saw the injustice that had just occurred. She wished they could understand how hurtful it felt to be judged and removed simply because of who she was. She felt an urge to speak out, to make sure this moment did not go unnoticed or unchallenged. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from a close friend. The timing felt almost serendipitous. She quickly dialed the number, hoping to find someone who could listen without judgment. When her friend answered, she recounted the incident in detail, her voice steady even though her emotions were raw. She spoke about the man's aggression, the manager's unfair decision, and the way other patrons had reacted, or failed to react. Her friend listened intently, expressing anger and disbelief at the situation. Together, they discussed what could be done to address the injustice. Her friend encouraged her to document what had happened. She agreed, pulling out her phone and opening the camera. She began recording a video, speaking directly to the audience she hoped would see it. She described the events clearly and calmly, focusing on the facts rather than letting her anger dominate the message. She wanted people to understand the situation and the impact it had on her, to feel the weight of the discrimination she experienced. While recording, she thought carefully about her words. She wanted to be honest and direct, but also measured and thoughtful. Her goal was not to attack, but to shed light on an injustice. She wanted viewers to see that racism still existed in everyday places, even in spaces that were supposed to be welcoming. She hoped her video would inspire others to stand up against unfair treatment and to recognize the courage it takes to confront discrimination. As she finished recording, she felt a small sense of empowerment. She had taken the first step in turning a painful moment into something meaningful. She knew the path ahead would not be easy, but she was determined not to let the incident end in silence. She decided to share the video on social media, hoping to reach a wider audience and bring attention to the restaurant's behavior. The woman took one last look at the restaurant from the sidewalk. She felt a mix of sadness and resolve. Sadness for the disrespect and discrimination she had endured, but also a sense of determination that she would not allow this incident to define her or go unanswered. She walked away slowly, knowing that the next few minutes could change not just her day, but potentially the way others saw justice and equality. Even as she walked, she rehearsed the message she wanted to share. She wanted people to understand the emotional toll of such encounters, the fear, the embarrassment, and the indignation. She wanted them to see the human side of racism, not just statistics or news reports. This was her story, her lived experience, and she was ready to make it heard. By the time she found a quiet spot to sit and gather her thoughts, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just the victim of a small act of hate. She was becoming a voice for accountability and change. She knew that speaking out was the first step toward ensuring that such incidents were acknowledged and addressed, not ignored or forgotten. Her mind was already moving ahead, thinking about how to frame her story, how to make it clear and compelling without exaggerating or losing authenticity. She wanted every word to reflect the reality of what happened, the emotions she felt, and the resilience she was determined to hold on to. It was important to her that others could relate, empathize, and perhaps be inspired to act when faced with similar situations. As she sat there, preparing to share her experience with the world, she felt a quiet strength settling in. She realized that while the restaurant could attempt to erase her presence for a few minutes, it could not erase her story or the truth she carried. She was ready to take control of the narrative and turn a moment of humiliation into a catalyst for awareness, understanding, and change. After leaving the restaurant, she needed a few moments to catch her breath. The cool air outside felt soothing, but it could not immediately calm the storm of thoughts and emotions swirling in her mind. Anger, frustration, disbelief, and a sense of humiliation all collided inside her, creating a weight she could not simply shake off. She found a nearby bench and sat down, her bag resting beside her. She stared ahead at the passing cars and pedestrians, but her mind was elsewhere. Replaying the incident over and over, she thought about the man who had confronted her, the manager who had failed to support her, and the silent patrons who had done nothing. The unfairness of it all weighed heavily on her heart. Her phone vibrated in her hand and she saw a message from a close friend checking in. She quickly called, grateful for the immediate support. As soon as her friend answered, she poured out the story, recounting every detail with clarity and emotion. She described the man's aggressive behavior, the manager's decision to side with him, and how alone she felt in the middle of it all. Her voice, though calm, carried an underlying tremor, a reflection of the emotional turmoil she was feeling. Her friend listened carefully, expressing shock and outrage at the injustice. They offered comfort, reassurance, and a clear reminder that she did not deserve what had happened. During the conversation, her friend asked what she wanted to do next. She paused, considering the options. She did not want to let the moment fade into silence. She wanted to make sure her experience was acknowledged, that the restaurant could not simply ignore what had happened. She wanted to create accountability, not just for herself, but for anyone who might face the same type of treatment in the future. After thinking it through, she decided she would document the incident and share her story publicly. She knew that bringing attention to the situation could help spark change and perhaps prevent others from facing similar humiliation. She opened her phone and began to record a video, speaking clearly and directly. She explained the situation calmly, focusing on the facts without letting anger dominate her words. She described the events as they happened, highlighting the man's hostility, the manager's unfair response, and the reaction of other patrons. She wanted viewers to understand the reality of the situation and the emotional toll it had taken on her. She spoke with authenticity, her voice steady, even as she acknowledged the hurt she felt. Her words were deliberate, chosen to reflect both the injustice she experienced and the strength she was determined to maintain. As she recorded, she reflected on the broader implications of the incident. This was not just about one man or one restaurant. It was about a larger pattern of discrimination that she had seen repeatedly throughout her life. She remembered past encounters where she had been judged, dismissed, or treated differently because of her skin color. Each experience had left a mark, but none had diminished her resolve to live fully and to advocate for fairness. This video, she realized, was a way to take a painful experience and turn it into something meaningful, something that could inspire others to speak up as well. Once she finished recording, she paused to review the video. It was concise, honest, and powerful. She felt a small surge of empowerment knowing that she had captured the truth in her own words. She thought about the people who might watch it, the ones who had experienced similar treatment, the ones who might not have understood the impact of such behavior, and even those who might need to confront their own biases. She knew that the video alone could not solve everything, but it could serve as a starting point, a spark that could ignite conversations and awareness. She shared the video on her social media accounts, tagging the restaurant and including a clear description of what had occurred. Within minutes, the reactions began to appear. Comments of support, outrage, and encouragement flooded in from friends, strangers, and even some patrons who had witnessed similar experiences. People shared their own stories, many of them expressing gratitude that she had spoken up, others expressing anger at the injustice. The video quickly gained traction, spreading beyond her immediate network and reaching a much wider audience. She watched in awe as the support poured in, realizing that her decision to document the incident had amplified her voice far beyond what she could have imagined. As the video circulated, the woman felt a sense of responsibility to continue addressing the situation thoughtfully. She knew that people were watching, and that her response could influence how others perceived the incident and her intentions. She began thinking strategically about how to engage with the restaurant in a constructive way. She wanted them to acknowledge the wrongdoing, apologize, and take steps to prevent future incidents. Her goal was not to seek revenge, but to create accountability and encourage positive change. Throughout the afternoon, she continued to receive messages of support and solidarity. Some people shared advice on how to approach the restaurant, including tips on how to escalate the matter to corporate management if necessary. Others encouraged her to speak to local media, explaining that her story had the potential to reach even more people and create broader awareness about discrimination in public spaces. She felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. She understood that taking action could be emotionally taxing, but she also knew that remaining silent would do nothing to challenge the injustice. After some thought, she drafted a clear and concise message to the restaurant's corporate office. She recounted the incident, providing details about the date, time, and location, and included the video she had recorded. She expressed her disappointment and hurt, emphasizing that the behavior she experienced was unacceptable and required immediate attention. She requested a formal response and asked for information on the steps they would take to address the situation and prevent it from happening again. Writing the message was empowering. It felt like a concrete step toward seeking justice. As she sent the email, she reflected on the journey that had led her to this point. The initial feelings of fear and humiliation were still present, but they had been replaced, at least partially, by determination and purpose. She realized that her response had transformed a painful encounter into an opportunity to advocate for fairness and to raise awareness about the impact of discrimination. She felt a renewed sense of control over the situation, knowing that she had chosen to respond with courage rather than letting the incident define her. While waiting for a response, she took some time to document her own thoughts in a personal journal. Writing helped her process the emotions she had experienced and provided a way to clarify her goals. She described the man's behavior, the manager's actions, and the reactions of bystanders, but she also explored her own feelings and reflections. She considered the ways in which discrimination had affected her life over time and how each experience had shaped her perspective. This introspection reinforced her commitment to speaking out and using her voice to create awareness and change. Later, she reviewed the comments and messages on her social media posts. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. People expressed empathy, shared their own experiences, and encouraged her to continue advocating for accountability. Some messages offered practical advice on dealing with corporate responses, while others simply provided moral support. She felt connected to a community of people who understood her experience and shared her desire for justice. This connection was comforting, reinforcing her belief that she was not alone in facing such challenges. She realized that part of her responsibility was to remain composed and clear in her communications. She wanted to ensure that her story would be taken seriously, and that the restaurant could not dismiss her experience. She practiced speaking about the incident with confidence and clarity, preparing herself in case she needed to speak with media representatives or corporate staff. She knew that maintaining a calm and assertive approach would be more effective than reacting with anger, even though anger was natural and understandable. As the afternoon turned into evening, she felt a growing sense of resolve. She understood that the next steps could be challenging, but she also knew that taking action was the right choice. She reminded herself that her voice mattered, that her experience deserved to be acknowledged, and that by speaking out, she could contribute to a larger movement against discrimination. The incident, while painful, had become a catalyst for empowerment and purpose. Throughout the evening, she continued to monitor the response to her video and messages. The conversation online continued, with people expressing support and demanding accountability from the restaurant. She began to see that her actions were making an impact, that her decision to speak up had resonated with others, and inspired them to reflect on similar issues in their own lives. She felt a sense of pride and determination, knowing that she was turning a moment of personal injustice into an opportunity for change. By the end of the day, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and accomplishment. The emotional toll of the incident and the subsequent advocacy was significant, but it was balanced by a sense of empowerment and purpose. She understood that the journey was far from over, but she also recognized the importance of taking deliberate, thoughtful steps in seeking justice and accountability. She felt ready to continue the process, knowing that her voice, her story, and her determination could create meaningful change. The next morning, she woke up feeling a mix of emotions. Sleep had come fitfully, with her mind running over every detail of the previous day. She thought about the video she had shared, the messages of support she had received, and the small but growing sense of empowerment she felt. Despite the emotional exhaustion, she knew that the day ahead might be even more important than the one before. People were beginning to notice her story, and she felt a sense of responsibility to handle it carefully and thoughtfully. She started her morning by checking her social media accounts. The response to her video had been much larger than she expected. Comments poured in from friends, strangers, and even people from other cities. Some shared their own experiences of discrimination, expressing gratitude that she had spoken up. Others expressed outrage at the behavior she had faced, offering words of encouragement and advice on how to continue addressing the situation. She read each message carefully, taking the time to appreciate the support and to understand the perspectives being shared. The outpouring of attention was overwhelming, but it also reinforced her belief that speaking out had been the right choice. As she scrolled, she noticed that local news outlets had begun to pick up the story. Clips of her video were being shared alongside commentary about the incident, highlighting both the blatant racism she had faced and the lack of immediate support from the restaurant staff. She realized that her story was no longer just a personal account. It had become a public conversation about justice, equality, and accountability. The weight of that realization made her nervous, but it also strengthened her resolve to continue speaking out and engaging with the situation constructively. She spent some time responding to comments, thanking people for their support and sharing updates about her next steps. She also reached out to her friend who had encouraged her to document the incident, discussing ideas for how to further raise awareness. Together, they brainstormed ways to amplify her message, ensuring that the focus remained on addressing the behavior she had experienced and promoting meaningful change. They talked about the importance of staying calm and composed in all public interactions, knowing that her approach would influence how seriously people took the situation. By mid-morning, she decided to contact the restaurant's corporate office again. The previous day, she had sent a detailed email describing the incident and requesting a response. Now she wanted to follow up, emphasizing the urgency of the matter. She drafted a message outlining the video's reach, the public reaction, and the need for immediate accountability. She requested a meeting, or at least a direct response from someone in a leadership position, hoping to ensure that the restaurant could not ignore the incident any longer. Sending the message felt like taking control, turning the initial helplessness she had felt into deliberate action. While waiting for a reply, she prepared herself for possible media interviews. She knew that reporters might want to ask questions about her experience, and she wanted to be ready. She practiced speaking about the incident clearly and calmly, emphasizing the facts and her emotional experience without letting anger or fear dominate. She considered the questions she might be asked and thought carefully about her answers, wanting to ensure that her story would be conveyed with authenticity and purpose. She reminded herself that this was about more than just her own experience. It was about raising awareness and inspiring others to act against injustice. By late morning, she received an email from the restaurant's corporate office. They acknowledged the incident and expressed regret for what had occurred, promising to investigate and take appropriate action. The response was formal but polite, and she could tell that the situation was now being taken seriously. While the email did not resolve everything immediately, it represented an important step toward accountability. She felt a small sense of relief, knowing that her voice had been heard and that her actions were making an impact. She shared the update with her friends and supporters, expressing gratitude for their encouragement and advice. The sense of community she felt was profound. She realized that her experience, while painful, had created connections and inspired others to think critically about discrimination and their own roles in challenging it. She took a moment to reflect on how quickly things had escalated, from a humiliating incident in a restaurant to a broader public conversation about equality and justice. In the afternoon, she received a call from a local journalist who wanted to interview her about the incident. She agreed, understanding that media coverage could help amplify her message further. During the interview, she spoke candidly about the confrontation, the manager's response, and the emotional impact of being treated unfairly. She also emphasized the importance of accountability and the need for businesses to create inclusive environments where all customers feel safe and respected. Her words were measured, honest, and compelling, capturing both the personal and societal aspects of the situation. The interview was published later that day, and it quickly gained attention online. People shared it widely, expressing both support and outrage. The combination of her video, the social media response, and the media coverage created a momentum that she had not anticipated. She realized that the initial humiliation she had felt in the restaurant had transformed into a platform for meaningful dialogue about discrimination, fairness, and respect. As the day progressed, she continued to receive messages from people inspired by her courage. Some shared their own stories. Others offered advice or practical suggestions for continuing her advocacy. She felt a profound sense of connection to a larger community of individuals committed to standing up against injustice. Each message reinforced her understanding that speaking out, even when it felt daunting, was powerful and necessary. In the evening, she reflected on the events of the past 24 hours. The experience had been emotionally draining, but it had also been transformative. She realized that her actions had created a ripple effect, reaching far beyond the walls of the restaurant. Her decision to document the incident, share her story, and engage with both social media and the press had turned a moment of personal pain into a catalyst for awareness and change. She spent time organizing her thoughts and planning her next steps. She wanted to ensure that her story continued to have impact and that the restaurant would be held accountable. She considered reaching out to advocacy groups and community organizations, sharing her experience and offering guidance on how to respond to similar incidents. She also planned to continue documenting the process, keeping the public informed about the restaurant's response and any changes implemented as a result of her actions. Throughout the day, she remained mindful of her emotional well-being. She took breaks, practiced deep breathing, and reminded herself that she was strong and capable. She understood that addressing discrimination was not just about external action, but also about maintaining her own resilience. She drew strength from the support of friends, family, and the broader community who had rallied around her story. By nightfall, she felt a sense of accomplishment and empowerment. The initial fear and humiliation she had felt were still present, but they were now accompanied by pride in her courage and determination. She had turned a painful experience into an opportunity to raise awareness, advocate for accountability, and inspire others. She knew that the days ahead would bring further challenges, but she also knew that she was prepared to face them with composure, clarity, and purpose. As she settled in for the night, She reflected on the journey that had begun just 2 days ago. A single moment of discrimination had become the starting point for a larger conversation about justice and equality. She realized that her voice, her story, and her actions had the power to create change. She felt a renewed sense of responsibility and commitment, understanding that the fight against discrimination required courage, persistence, and thoughtful action. The experience, while painful, had also become a source of strength and empowerment, guiding her as she continued to advocate for fairness and accountability. The following day, she received a call from the corporate office of the restaurant. The voice on the other end was calm and professional, but there was an unmistakable tone of seriousness. They acknowledged that the incident she had experienced was unacceptable and assured her that they had begun an internal investigation. She listened carefully, taking note of every word, aware that this conversation was a critical step toward holding the restaurant accountable. She remained calm, speaking clearly about the events, the emotional impact, and her expectations for a proper resolution. She emphasized the importance of ensuring that no other customer would have to face the same humiliation. The corporate representative expressed sincere regret and promised that corrective actions would be taken. They discussed the steps they were planning, reviewing the behavior of the staff involved, implementing sensitivity training, and providing a formal apology to her. She asked for clarity on the timeline for these actions and requested updates at each stage. It was important to her that this process was not rushed or handled superficially. She wanted a meaningful response that reflected a real commitment to change. After the call, she took a moment to breathe and reflect. It was a relief to hear that her concerns were being addressed seriously, but she knew the work was far from over. She had to ensure that the promises made by the corporate office were actually fulfilled. She also knew that the attention her story had received could fade quickly if there was no visible follow-through. She reminded herself that persistence was essential in matters of accountability. Her voice and the voices of those supporting her needed to remain present and active. Later in the morning, she received an email requesting a meeting at the restaurant headquarters. They wanted her to come in and discuss her experience in person, allowing her to provide feedback and suggestions on how to improve the customer experience and prevent incidents like this from happening again. She considered the opportunity carefully, recognizing that it was a chance to make a tangible impact. Accepting the invitation, she prepared herself to approach the meeting with both honesty and diplomacy, knowing that her words could influence meaningful changes. She spent the next few hours organizing her thoughts and reflecting on what she wanted to communicate during the meeting. She wrote down key points about the incident, the emotional effects, and the areas where she believed the restaurant needed to improve. She also thought about constructive suggestions, such as better staff training, clear policies for handling conflicts, and ways to promote an inclusive environment. She wanted to ensure that her input would be practical and actionable, not just a recounting of her experience. When she arrived at the headquarters, she was greeted politely and guided to a meeting room. Several corporate representatives were present, including the regional manager and the head of customer relations. They welcomed her and expressed appreciation for her willingness to share her story in person. She felt a mix of nerves and determination, but she reminded herself that her purpose was to advocate for change and to ensure that the incident would not be ignored. During the meeting, she calmly recounted the events at the restaurant, describing the man's behavior, the manager's actions, and the reactions of other patrons. She spoke about the emotional toll it had taken on her, emphasizing the humiliation, fear, and anger she had felt. She also discussed the broader implications of the incident, highlighting how discrimination in public spaces affects not just individuals, but the community as a whole. Her words were measured and clear, reflecting both the seriousness of the situation and her desire for constructive solutions. The corporate team listened attentively, taking notes and asking questions to clarify details. They acknowledged the shortcomings in the staff's response and expressed their commitment to addressing the issues. She suggested specific measures such as comprehensive sensitivity training for all employees, a clear protocol for handling complaints of discrimination, and public messaging reinforcing the company's dedication to inclusivity. She also recommended follow-up evaluations to ensure that the changes were effective and sustainable. As the discussion progressed, she noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The representatives were not just listening. They were actively engaged, asking thoughtful questions and considering her suggestions seriously. It was clear that her voice had an impact. She felt a sense of validation, knowing that her experience and perspective were being recognized and taken seriously. The meeting was not just a formality. It was a genuine opportunity to influence the way the restaurant conducted its business and treated its customers. By the end of the meeting, the corporate representatives outlined the steps they would take, including a formal apology to her, a review of the staff involved, and the implementation of mandatory training programs. They promised to keep her informed throughout the process and to provide updates on the changes being made. She left the headquarters feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and cautious optimism. Her voice had been heard, and tangible actions were planned to prevent future incidents. As she walked back to her car, she reflected on how far she had come since the initial confrontation. What had begun as a humiliating and painful encounter had transformed into an opportunity for advocacy and meaningful change. She felt empowered, knowing that she had taken control of the situation and turned it into a positive force. The experience reinforced her belief in the importance of standing up against injustice, not only for herself but for others who might face similar discrimination. That evening, she shared an update with her online followers, expressing gratitude for their support and explaining the progress that had been made. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with people praising her courage and determination. Many commented on how her actions had inspired them to confront discrimination in their own lives, while others emphasized the importance of persistence and advocacy. She felt a deep sense of connection with her community, realizing that her story had become a source of inspiration and empowerment for others. In the days that followed, she continued to monitor the restaurant's actions and maintain communication with the corporate office. She received updates on staff training schedules, policy revisions, and plans for public communication about the incident and the steps being taken to address it. Each update reinforced her sense of purpose, confirming that her efforts were making a tangible difference. She also continued to share her experiences and reflections online, encouraging dialogue about discrimination, accountability, and the importance of standing up for oneself. Throughout this period, she remained mindful of her own well-being. She balanced her advocacy efforts with self-care, taking time to rest, reflect, and process the emotions that surfaced. She recognized that addressing discrimination required both resilience and self-compassion. By caring for herself, she was better able to sustain her efforts and remain effective in her advocacy. She also began to think about the long-term impact of her actions. Beyond the immediate changes at the restaurant, she hoped that her story would contribute to a broader conversation about equality and respect in public spaces. She considered ways to engage with community organizations, educational programs, and advocacy groups to share her experience and provide guidance on handling similar situations. She wanted her story to have lasting value, helping to create a culture where discrimination is addressed promptly and effectively. As the week progressed, she observed tangible changes at the restaurant. Staff members who had been involved in the incident were held accountable, and new policies were being implemented to promote inclusivity and fairness. She felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that her actions had directly influenced these outcomes. The combination of public awareness, corporate accountability, and her own advocacy had created a meaningful response to the incident. By the end of the week, she reflected on the journey she had undertaken. What began as a humiliating encounter had evolved into a powerful story of resilience, advocacy, and change. She felt proud of her courage and determination, knowing that she had not only addressed the injustice she faced but also contributed to a larger movement for fairness and equality. The experience had strengthened her sense of purpose and reinforced her belief in the power of speaking out against discrimination. She understood that the fight against injustice was ongoing, and that challenges would continue to arise. However, she felt equipped to handle future obstacles with confidence and clarity. The experience had taught her the importance of documenting incidents, speaking out, and engaging constructively with those in positions of authority. It had also shown her the value of community support, self-care, and strategic action in creating meaningful change. As she settled in for the night, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had transformed a moment of pain into an opportunity for growth, learning, and advocacy. Her voice had been heard, her experience validated, and tangible actions were being taken to address the situation. She felt empowered, inspired, and ready to continue using her story to advocate for fairness, equality, and accountability in her community and beyond. The following week, she decided it was time to visit the restaurant once again. The experience of being forced out the previous week still lingered in her mind, but she approached this visit with a sense of purpose and calm determination. She wanted to see firsthand the changes that had been promised, and to experience the restaurant in a new, more inclusive atmosphere. She reminded herself that this visit was not just for her own closure, but also a way to observe whether the lessons had truly been absorbed by the staff. As she walked through the doors, she noticed subtle but meaningful differences immediately. The hostess greeted her warmly and respectfully, offering a table near the window without hesitation. The restaurant felt more welcoming, and she sensed that the staff had been briefed on inclusivity and proper customer treatment. It was a stark contrast to the hostility she had faced before, and she felt a small wave of relief and satisfaction wash over her. She took her seat, observing the other patrons around her. There was a calm, friendly atmosphere, and she felt reassured by the lack of tension she had previously experienced. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax and enjoy the moment. The sense of empowerment she had gained through her advocacy over the past week made this ordinary act of sitting down for a meal feel symbolic. It was a quiet victory, a demonstration that change was possible when courage met accountability. While she waited for her order, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about the man who had confronted her, the initial humiliation, and the long hours she had spent documenting, sharing, and advocating for change. Each step had been emotionally taxing, yet it had also been transformative. She realized that her voice had not only brought attention to the injustice she faced, but had also inspired others to confront and challenge discrimination in their own lives. The experience had strengthened her sense of self and her understanding of the power of persistence. The manager approached her table to personally apologize. His demeanor was sincere, and he acknowledged the errors in judgment that had occurred previously. He explained the steps that had been taken, including staff training, policy revisions, and a renewed emphasis on creating a welcoming environment for all customers. She listened carefully, appreciating the transparency and the effort to take responsibility. The apology was meaningful not just in words, but in the actions that had been implemented as a result. As she interacted with the staff throughout her visit, she noticed that the atmosphere of respect and professionalism was consistent across the board. Employees treated every customer with courtesy and attentiveness, demonstrating that the training and policy changes had been effective. It was encouraging to see that the restaurant had taken the situation seriously and had made tangible efforts to improve. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that her advocacy had contributed to these changes. During her meal, she reflected on the broader lessons of this experience. She understood that standing up against injustice often requires courage, persistence, and strategic action. Documenting the incident, sharing her story, and engaging with the corporate office had transformed a personal experience of discrimination into a catalyst for meaningful change. She felt empowered by the knowledge that she had turned a moment of humiliation into an opportunity to educate, advocate, and influence others. After finishing her meal, she took some time to speak with the staff and offer encouragement. She shared her appreciation for their efforts to improve customer service and inclusivity, acknowledging the steps they had taken to create a more welcoming environment. She emphasized that the changes were not just about avoiding negative publicity, but about genuinely fostering respect and equality for all patrons. Her words were received with gratitude, and she felt a sense of connection and mutual understanding with the staff. She also spent time speaking with other patrons who had witnessed the incident indirectly through social media. Many expressed support and admiration for her courage, and some shared their own experiences with discrimination in public spaces. These conversations reinforced the sense that her actions had a ripple effect, inspiring others to stand up for themselves and to advocate for fairness in their communities. She realized that her story was not just about one restaurant or one incident, but about creating awareness and promoting empathy and understanding. As she left the restaurant, she felt a profound sense of closure. The initial humiliation and anger had been transformed into empowerment and purpose. She had confronted the injustice directly, advocated for change, and witnessed tangible results. The journey had been challenging, but it had also been deeply rewarding. She understood that her experience could serve as a guide for others facing similar challenges, demonstrating the importance of resilience, documentation, and constructive advocacy. In the days that followed, she continued to share her reflections on social media, focusing on the positive outcomes and the lessons learned. She emphasized the importance of standing up against discrimination, documenting incidents, and seeking accountability from those in positions of authority. Her posts received widespread engagement, with people expressing admiration, sharing their own experiences, and discussing ways to promote inclusivity and respect in their communities. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that her story was inspiring dialogue and action. She also began exploring opportunities to engage with local organizations and advocacy groups. She wanted to share her experience, provide guidance on addressing discrimination, and contribute to broader efforts to create inclusive environments in public spaces. She recognized that her journey had equipped her with knowledge, confidence, and credibility, and she was eager to use these resources to benefit others. Throughout this period, she remained mindful of maintaining balance and self-care. She understood that advocacy and engagement could be emotionally demanding, and she made sure to take time for rest, reflection, and personal growth. She practiced mindfulness and gratitude, focusing on the progress made and the positive impact of her actions. This approach allowed her to sustain her efforts while protecting her own well-being. Over time, she observed lasting changes at the restaurant. Staff continued to implement inclusive practices, and the corporate office maintained transparency and accountability. She occasionally returned as a customer, observing that the atmosphere remained welcoming and respectful. These visits reinforced her sense of accomplishment and validated the efforts she had undertaken. The experience had become a testament to the power of speaking out and advocating for fairness. Reflecting on the entire journey, she felt proud of her courage, resilience, and strategic action. What had begun as a painful, humiliating encounter had evolved into a powerful story of advocacy, empowerment, and tangible change. She understood that discrimination was a pervasive challenge, but she also recognized that individual actions, when combined with community support and accountability, could create meaningful impact. Her story was a reminder that speaking up matters, and that persistence and courage can transform injustice into progress. As she looked to the future, she felt motivated to continue using her voice to promote fairness and inclusivity. She knew that challenges would arise, but she felt equipped with the experience, knowledge, and confidence to respond effectively. The incident at the restaurant had not only strengthened her sense of self, but also deepened her commitment to creating a world where everyone is treated with respect and dignity. She carried this sense of purpose forward, empowered by the knowledge that her actions had made a real difference and could continue to inspire others to stand up against injustice.